We recorded the interview you're about to watch 5 days ago, and I've been thinking about it ever since. It's with a former congressman from Pennsylvania called Curt Weldon. Curt Weldon was a very significant figure in Washington 20 years ago. He was not some obscure backbencher. He was one of the most powerful Republicans in the Congress, about to take over the Armed Services Committee, until he asked questions about the official story on 9/11. At which point, the Bush administration sent the FBI to his daughter's house, destroyed her life, never charged her with a crime, and effectively got Curt Weldon bounced out of Congress. I haven't talked to him in 20 years. I didn't know exactly what to expect, but this conversation, the one you're about to see, raises far more questions than I ever anticipated. This is not a crazy person. These are not crazy questions. He makes no claims he doesn't have personal firsthand evidence of. When it ended, I asked him how many other officials who were in and around Washington during 9/11 have similar questions. And he said to me, as far as I know, all of them. And he's still in touch with a lot of those people. After this conversation, which again we've been thinking about ever since, I thought it might be time to look a little more deeply into the 9/11 Commission report. Was it accurate? 9/11 changed the United States forever. Those of us who remember it, who lived through it, can tell you this was a different country afterward, completely different, and not a better country. And so there is no more significant historical event in the lifetimes of any living American than 9/11. And the fact that there are still outstanding questions about what exactly happened and why is troubling. Up until this point, most of the people who've addressed these questions are either crazy or seem slightly crazy. Now is the time for a sober look, not a wild-eyed, speculative look, but an honest look and honest conversations with people who participated in the response to that day, government officials. And so we're going to do that. We are planning right now a multi-part documentary series on 9/11, and we hope to bring that to you as soon as we possibly can. And now, former Congressman Curt Weldon. Congressman, thank you so much for doing this. I haven't seen you in 20 years. One of the last times I thought about you was right around 2006, and you had been a frequent guest on the show that I was hosting then, and I read that the FBI had raided your daughter's house, and I thought, man, I always like Curt Weldon. I guess he's corrupt. And then I never heard anything about it, and then you lost that election to a guy who I always thought was kind of repulsive. And then probably 15 years passed, and I thought to myself, wait a second, Curt Weldon was the only Republican I'm aware of who criticized the U.S. response, the intel agency's response to 9/11, who wrote a book blaming elements of the U.S. government for allowing 9/11 to happen and then covering it up. And then right on the cusp of becoming, tell me if I'm getting this wrong, chairman of the Armed Services Committee, the FBI raids your daughter's house and you lose an election in which your opponent has funding from all over the United States. No one's ever heard of this guy. He's got more money and you're out of Congress. And I began to think maybe this was a setup. So I thought I would ask you.
Well, it definitely was. And you're always one of my heroes. I enjoyed your show with Paul Begala and when I did Hannity
many
Colmes
years ago,
all the others, and enjoyed. And I took my work very seriously. I'm a teacher by profession, youngest of 9 kids, firefighter as a volunteer all my life, and that's my devotion even to this day. I don't get any money for it, but it's what I'm committed to and why I care about 9/11 so much. I was at 9/11. I was not 9/11. I was at the Trade Center in 93 at the invitation of Fire Commissioner Howard Safer to go up there and learn about what had occurred the first time they attacked us. And they introduced me to a young fire officer, former Marine, 5 kids, named Ray Downey. He became one of my best friends. Ray told me what he thought we should do. I took his advice seriously and wrote the legislation to create the Gilmore Commission. The Gilmore Commission was chaired by Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore, a man of integrity. I had him on a podcast last September for 20 minutes. And the Gilmore Commission's recommendations were largely what the 9/11 Commission took credit for after the fact. One of those recommendations was to have a fusion center of intelligence be put together. At the time I was doing this on behalf of the firefighters to deal with disasters, I was in the position to oversee the funding as the chairman of all military research and technology funding, about $180 billion. The services were building information dominant centers. The Army's was at Fort Belvoir, and I would go down there regularly and meet with them, and we became good friends. I didn't bother getting right into the program. I didn't need to, but I knew what they were using with new software like Starlight and Spires and Fusion and data mining and analysis and link analysis. This was going to be important to prevent what happened in 93.
Yes.
So I supported
Which was the first bombing of the World Trade Center.
First bombing.
Right.
And as a result, I went to John Hamre, Deputy Secretary of Defense under Clinton, and I said, John, you have to go see what they're doing down there. He did. He called me, said, you're right, Mr. Chairman. And by the way, John Hamre had endorsed me for chairman of the committee in 2000, as did Rumsfeld.
Yeah.
This is before 9/11, obviously. Both endorsed me publicly. I had their letters. And he said, but you've got to convince the CIA and the FBI to let us use their raw data because there are 33 classified systems. And if they don't allow us to use their data, this won't succeed. On November the 4th of 1999, in my office in the Rayburn building, I had John Hamre, Deputy Secretary of Defense. I had the Deputy Director of the FBI, and I had their names, and the Deputy Director of the CIA. And we talked about the NOAA, National Operation Analysis Hub, policymaker and warfighters tool to deal with emerging transnational terrorist threats, the Fusion Center. Hamre said, we need this. I'll manage it. I said, I'll get it funded. The FBI said, great, we're all in. And the CIA said, we don't want it. We're not supporting it. We're doing something called CI-21 on our own. I spent 2 years traveling around the country, giving speeches at intelligence forums, calling for a fusion center. I put language in 2 successive defense bills, calling for a fusion center. 9/11 happens. I get frantic calls from 4 of those professional staffers at the Able Danger Team, which I later learned was the name of this group at Fort Belvoir. We have to see you right away, Mr. Chairman. Scott Philpott, Annapolis grad, Navy career officer, commander of 4 ships, pleading with me to meet. Tony Schaefer, Lieutenant Colonel, Bronze Star recipient, spy for the military. Eileen Pricer, Air Force career intelligence officer, expert on computers, and Eric Kleinsmith. I met with each of them privately. They all told me the same story, and they rolled out the charts that I just showed you. Those charts I will make public now because they're not classified. I showed them when I testified before the Senate hearing. We identified every cell of Al-Qaeda in the world the year before 9/11. We identified the New York cell a year before 9/11. We knew there was going to be a problem. The Able Danger Team tried to go to the FBI and Justice Department 3 times. We have the names. All 3 times they were stopped. We have the names of the person in the FBI that was told to deny the meetings. They were not allowed to transfer the information. That information, when I came out with my book, Louis Freeh, former FBI director, wrote in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal and said on Good Morning America, could have prevented 9/11 from happening. That's not me saying that. That's Louis Freeh. And General Keith Lambert, our general in charge of special operations on horseback, was asked in this award-winning book, became a movie, on page 27, General, what were your thoughts when 9/11 happened? And he said, within seconds, I knew who had done the attack, and I knew it involved Mohammed Atta. Thirdly, after this all broke and I came out with my book criticizing the agency and started really going crazy protecting these brave heroes that were being abused by Defense Intelligence, the Inspector General for the Pentagon files a whistleblower paper. I have a copy of it. I'll give it to you. His name is John Crane. He asked for protection because his bosses in DIA refused to allow him to become a whistleblower when he told them that he was told to lie to the Congress. He was told to misinform the Congress. I have that in writing, Tucker. The 9/11 Commission is a cover-up, 1,000% cover-up. Zelikow was the lead of the cover-up.
Philip Zelikow was the chairman.
Philip Zelikow. He was handpicked by Condoleezza Rice. When Tony Schaefer met Zelikow over in Afghanistan, because Zelikow took a team through to see if there were soldiers who had maybe encountered some information about 9/11 in advance. Tony Schaefer had been back deployed in Afghanistan at the time. So he told his commanding officer, I should talk to them because I was a part of a special team. He met with Zelikow. They exchanged business cards in Kabul. And Zelikow said to him, Lieutenant Colonel, you've got to see me as soon as you get back to America. It's very important. When Tony went back to the States, they had shut down his office, locked his office, secured all his files, and they then worked to destroy his personal reputation. They tried to destroy his career. I went to the floor and did a 1-hour special order, calling it a scandal bigger than Watergate. You can watch the footage. It's available online. I said, this is outrageous that the Defense Intelligence Agency is screwing a lieutenant colonel because he's telling the truth about what he was told to talk about when he came back from Afghanistan. Tony Shaffer then went to work in the reserves because he had been basically harassed by the regular army because of what Zelikow did.
So I just want to back up a couple steps. So you're saying what others have said before, which is that elements of the U.S. government worked really, really hard to hide the fact that they could have prevented 9/11, that they had all the relevant information and for whatever reason ignored it. But motive really matters here. Do you believe that there were people in the U.S. government who made a bunch of mistakes or were too territorial and didn't share information with other agencies, therefore 9/11 happened, which is basically the conclusion of the 9/11 report, I think? Or do you believe that there were people in the U.S. government who knew it was going to happen and allowed it to happen on purpose?
Well, first of all, the 9/11 report has no credibility. I don't believe anything that is in that. It's a bunch of garbage. It's a lot of paper that has no substance. And I tend not to want to speculate on things that I can't prove 100% myself,
yes,
or I'm not willing to take a polygraph. What I can tell you unequivocally is there was a cover-up. And before I answer your question, I would state one more fact. Tony Shaffer got approval from his commanding general after this whole thing happened to write his memoirs. His memoirs are called Dark Heart. So he wrote the book. He had a publisher. He went to his commanding general to review the book as his protocol. His commanding general said, fine, Tony, there's nothing there that's a problem. Publish it. Tony publishes the book. Our deep state finds out he's publishing the book. A cease and desist order is issued against the publisher. Stop publishing the book. It's too late. Our government buys all 10,000 copies of the first edition of Dark Heart with taxpayer money, and they destroy them. So I asked Tony on a show last September, as I've done many times, Tony, you have the original version of the book, right? Yes, here it is, Congressman. You have the redacted version, right? Yes, here it is. What did they want out of your book that was so sensitive? What secret information were you giving, Tony? What classified information did your boss not see? He said, Congressman, the only thing they wanted out of my book was the fact that I named Zelikow and that I had briefed him in advance. That, Tucker, is treason. That means our agencies use their position not for something involving our national security, but for involving a cover-up of a person's identity who was publicly approved by the Congress of the United States, appointed by the security advisor to President Bush. It's a massive cover-up.
At what point following 9/11, since I just want to restate, you served in Congress for about 20 years, I think. Yep. And you really were at the heart of these questions, national security questions in the Congress. You were about to become chairman of Armed Services. So you're at the top of the pyramid for receiving relevant intelligence. At what point, you weren't just some random guy at all. At what point after 9/11, the attacks of that day, did you realize there's something bad going on here?
Well, it started before 9/11 when I realized that the intelligence I was getting as the vice chairman of the committee was not really solid intelligence. I would get better information from Bill Gertz, a reporter that you know,
yes,
coming to me with anonymous sources leaking to him,
yes,
about intel matters. And I would then go to the CIA and say, why am I getting this information from a reporter that I know you're leaking from classified sources that I'm not getting as a member of Congress who's the vice chairman of the Defense Committee? Are you playing games with me? And they wouldn't answer that. And that's what they do. They play games by manipulating the media to put out a narrative. And then we have to deal with that narrative. So, Tucker, what I did, there's a group in Washington that was known as the Cockroaches. They're a group of people that work for the intelligence agencies that get along socially. And I knew them all. They trusted me. I formed a loose network of about 15 or 20. We met for breakfast every week in the members' dining room in the Capitol. And they would feed me raw data. Then I would go to the classified briefings using that raw data, and I would ask questions of the CIA in front of the entire committee. And in many cases, I was the acting chairman because the chairman wasn't there. So here I am, the acting chairman of the entire Committee of Armed Services that fully embarrassed the intelligence agencies. And I'll get into that when we talk about the 9/11 information and post 9/11 where they put bin Laden. The point is that the agency plays games with Congress. The Congress thinks it's getting good information, and it's not.
Yes.
The agency wants members fighting with each other over stupid things so they can do what they want. And it's not all. There are good people in the agencies
Yes.
that I worked with and I would go to war over. But there are some scumbags. I know those scumbags. At the appropriate time, I'll name those scumbags who have made millions and millions of dollars and are making millions and millions of dollars today. They're making it in Ukraine. They're making it around the world because of context they established. And all that ties back to their positions that they got, supposedly working intelligence for the U.S. That's not what this country's all about. And you asked about my daughter.
Right,
What happened?
So give us the timeline. So you, 9/11 happens, you keep ascending in Congress, and you really, and I remember this well because I interviewed you on these topics at the time, 20 years ago when your book came out. And you start saying, wait a second, the U.S. government really blew this. There are people who knew this was happening, was going to happen, and for whatever reason didn't stop it. And you're really the only Republican who's saying this. And then 2006, you're up for re-election. It's an even year, of course, and you're from your district in Pennsylvania after 20 years. And out of nowhere, the FBI raids your daughter's house. And we're all told it's because she's corrupt, you're corrupt, et cetera, et cetera. And then you lose, and we kind of lose track of you, and Washington goes on as it does, and no one talks about 9/11 again. I think that's fair to say. I mean, I was there. I remember when all this happened, though. I didn't
covered it all.
I didn't put it together in my head at all until about a year ago. I was thinking about this in the shower. Whatever happened to Curt Weldon and his daughter? So I go on the internet, I'm like, is Curt Weldon's daughter in prison because she's so corrupt? Like,
Never talked to.
So what happened? So
Okay, well, here's what happened.
2006.
In 1999 and 2000, they wanted me to run for chairman of the committee and
Yep.
jump over 4 or 5 members.
Which committee? The
Armed Services
Yes.
Committee. But in Congress, the protocol is you wait
Of
till your
course.
time. So I have letters, which I can show you, Tucker, from Donald Rumsfeld endorsing me to become chairman of the Armed Services Committee in 2000.
Yes.
I have a letter from Deputy Secretary of Defense John Henry endorsing me to become chairman of the committee in 2000. Dozens and dozens of letters. Then 9/11 happens. I felt personally responsible because I knew that we could have prevented it by the information that the Able Danger team established by General Hugh Shelton had gathered and tried to transfer 3 times and were blocked. So I said, I owe this to Ray Downey. I'm wearing his jacket today. I owe this to the firefighters in New York and around the country to get to the truth. If it's the last thing I do, and I owe it to all those soldiers that we're now sending overseas.
That's right.
So what I did, Tucker, I supported George Bush when he said we're going to send our troops over to Afghanistan. He made those heroic comments about we're going to get them. I took that as a patriotic American, said, yes, we're going to get them. But I was worried about what the Afghans might do as they did the Russian troops when they were in Afghanistan. So Tucker, with Al Santoli, whom you know,
Yep.
and 2 other members of Congress, I privately, without the knowledge of our government or the CIA, I went to Paris. We met with King Zahir Shah, the king of Afghanistan, who was living in exile with his family in Paris. We met with him to convince him to go back to Kabul to convene a Loya Jirga of all the tribes, to convince them to accept the American troops before they went in, so it wouldn't be like they did with Russia. King Zahir Shah agreed to that. I'll give you the photographs, Tucker. And I had 2 members of Congress and Al Santoli with me, decorated Vietnam veteran. Zahir Shah went back. I did all I could to protect our American troops, not the CIA, our troops. Then I find out my intel team, those 20 people that were feeding me raw data, give me data within months after 9/11 that bin Laden's been sighted in a town called Ladiz. I have no idea where Ladiz is. So I go up Pennsylvania Avenue to a bookstore and buy a map. I just gave you the map here today, Tucker. You can show it. And I found Ladiz. It's not in Afghanistan. It's not in Pakistan. It's in Iran, in an area called Baluchistan. So I go to the next classified briefing for the full committee. Now I'm the vice chairman of the full committee. There are 60 members. I'm the acting chairman at this time. So I said to the CIA, I have information that bin Laden's in Ladiz. This is their response to me. Mr. Chairman, we've heard similar reports. We can either confirm or deny them. I was in shock. We're sending kids to die in Afghanistan, and we can't confirm or deny whether or not bin Laden's in Ladiz? 3 months go by. I'm still supporting the president. My intel team comes back to me and say, Curt, he's being treated at a military hospital outside of Tehran. I go back to the classified briefing and I ask the question in front of the full committee. And the answer from the CIA is, Mr. Chairman, we've heard similar reports. We can either confirm or deny that bin Laden is being treated at a military hospital outside of Tehran while we're sending kids to die in Afghanistan. I said, this is outrageous. And then, Tucker, I get a call from Jack Murtha, the most respected Democrat in the House, former Marine, who I work with closely. And he says to me, I want you to meet with Ron Klink, Democrat from Pittsburgh. And Ron Klink's still alive. He'll verify this, Tucker. Jack's dead, but Ron's alive. He said, Jack has a person who used to work for the agency that has information about Iran. And you investigate this kind of stuff, Curt. Will you meet with him? I said, sure. Ron Klink comes to my office and brings this very tall man who's a former person from the Swedish area, but he's a U.S. citizen. And I said, how can I help you? You know, Congressman Murtha asked me to help. Ron Klink wants me to help. He said, Congressman, I want you to help me get into Iran. I said, why do you want to go to Iran? He said, that's where bin Laden is. I said, why would you tell me that bin Laden's in Iran? He said, I was a knock for the agency. Do you know what a knock is?
Yeah, non-official cover.
That's right. He said, I was a knock for the agency, and I worked that area. And my friends are seeing bin Laden in Iran. If you help me get to Tehran, I'll leave my identity there. I'll get a piece of him, dead or alive, and I'll bring it back. At the time, there was a $25 million reward for bin Laden. I said, I can't help you right now because I'm in a battle over this follow-up to 9/11. Then I get another call, Tucker, from the Interior Department, totally separate. They want to bring in their top bird man, their bird expert. I didn't think that was unusual because I was the Republican on the Migratory Bird Commission. The Migratory Bird Commission.
No, there was a migratory.
It oversees all the flyways for all the refuges up and down the coast. I was the Republican.
Duck hunters like me, thank you, by the way.
John Dingell was a Democrat.
Of course, I've duck hunted with him, yeah.
2 senators and 3 cabinet members. So I figured they want to talk about birds. I'm on the Bird Commission. I'll meet with them. So this Interior Department bird expert brings in a U.S. citizen from Maine who's a Sikh, but he's a U.S. citizen, very wealthy family. And he's got 2 falcons on his shoulders, $1 million birds with the blinders on, beautiful, into my office. I said, good boy, they're gorgeous. How can I help you? He said, well, Congressman, I've devoted my life to falcons. He said, I helped write the UN protection treaties on falconry. He said, I trained all the children of the royal families in the sport of falconry.
Yes.
Because that's their sport. He said, they all know me. They all trust me.
In the Arab world, it's huge.
Yes.
Yes.
He said, so, and I want to help the country, and there's a reward for bin Laden. I said, yeah, I know that. He said, I want you to help me go to Iran. I said, why do you want to go to Iran? Now, he knows nothing about anything else I'm doing. My falconers are seeing bin Laden's birds flying in Iran. You help me go to Iran, they'll accept me there because they know me. I'll tag his birds, and I'll take the U.S. to exactly where he is. That's four full source identities that bin Laden was exactly where my intel people said he was. Over the course of time, Tucker, I developed 10 silver bullets. They wanted to do a movie about me after they took me out, and I'll get to when they took me out. I got a call from Michael Scheuer. Michael was career CIA. After I was taken out of office, he called my home. He said, Congressman, do you remember me? I said, vaguely, Michael. He said, well, I was the chairman of the bin Laden task force in the CIA. And these people that have met with you have shown me documents I never saw when I was working in the agency. And I was the bin Laden task force director. He said, we want you to work with us. We want you to be involved in a movie we're doing. I said, Michael, after what they did to my family, I can't do it right now. I hung up the phone. I get a call from General McInerney. About 3 months later, Tom McInerney. He said, Congressman, you remember me? I said, yes, General, I remember you. He said, I'd like you to work with us, Congressman. I'm working with Michael Scheuer and the Falconer, and we want you to be involved. I said, I'm not getting involved after what they did to my family. They all had the same story, Tucker. So what was it happening in 2006? All my elections were landslides.
It's one of the saddest things about this country. The country's getting sicker. Despite all of our wealth and technology, Americans aren't doing well overall. Obesity, heart disease, autoimmune conditions, all kinds of horrible chronic illnesses, weird cancers, they're all on the rise. Probably a lot of reasons for this, but one of them definitely is Americans don't eat very well anymore. They don't eat real food. Instead, they eat industrial substitutes, and it's not good. It's time for something new, and that's where masa chips come in. Masa has decided to revive real food by creating snacks how they used to be made, how they're supposed to be made. A masa chip has just 3 simple ingredients, not 117. 3. No seed oils, no artificial additives, just real delicious food. And I know this because we eat a ton of them in my house. And by the way, I feel great. So you can still continue to snack, but you can do it in a healthy way with chips without feeling guilty about it. Masa chips are delicious. They taste how a tortilla chip is supposed to taste. But the thing is, you can hit them really, really hard, and I have, and not feel bloated or sluggish after. You feel like you've done something decent for your body. You don't feel like you got a head injury, or you don't feel filled with guilt. You feel light and energetic. It's the kind of snack your grandparents ate. Worth bringing back. So you can go to masachips.com. Masa is M-A-S-A, by the way. masachips.com/Tucker to start snacking. Get 25% off. We enjoy them. You will too. Wait, can I just ask you to pause for 1 second? So you had a lot of evidence, it sounds
Absolute evidence.
that bin Laden was not in Afghanistan or Pakistan,
right.
where he was supposedly ultimately killed. Not in Iraq. He was in Iran. But Iran was also in the crosshairs of the Bush administration. It was part of the so-called axis of evil at the time. People were talking about invading Iran then. Why would the Bush administration hide the fact that...
It wasn't the Bush administration.
Oh?
Let me explain to you. And this is what Trump needs to understand. It started under Clinton, when the Clinton administration, Bill and Hillary Clinton, who I have no respect for, were allowed to be themselves to be used so they could make money. Tens and tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, because they allowed people, unscrupulous people, to control the agenda in Russia and around the world. And you've been going after some of this involving Russia. I can give you dozens of hard examples.
I believe it. And we've talked about this off camera, but I just want to get to specifically who was hiding the fact that bin Laden was in Iran and why.
Okay. It continued under Bush Jr.
Yep.
As I said, up until 2000, they wanted me to be chairman. All of a sudden, when I started questioning 9/11, all of a sudden the Bush people said, whoa.
Yeah, I bet.
John Sununu, after I was out of office, who I had a lot of respect for, was Bush's chief
smart man.
Staff.
Yeah, I know.
I was in his office, and they said this to me. He said, you know, Congressman, you were a great member. Everyone respected you, but you made one fundamental mistake. I said, what was that, John? He said, when you come to this city, you're either on one rail or the other rail. And you went down the middle and took on both rails. I said, well, John, I didn't pledge allegiance to the Republican Party.
Yeah.
I pledged allegiance to the Constitution. You guys were ecstatic when I took on the Clintons, when I took on Sandy Berger, when I took on the scumbags and what they did with China and Russia. You were ecstatic. But then when I saw things happening at 9/11, all of us, he said, well, that's why you're not here. I said, you know what, John? So be it. It's not the end of my life. And one day I'll tell the story, John. One day I'll tell the story, because that's what America needs to hear. They need members of Congress who don't become duped by scumbags in the intelligence agency making money for themselves. And you know what, Tucker? I challenge them. I'll name them, and I'll give their dollar amounts of where they're making money today in the countries that we're at war with. They care about themselves and their power. They don't care about the lives of the kids that we send to war. I saw it in Libya. I saw it in North Korea. I led delegations that were bipartisan to all of those places. They took it out on my daughter.
So I just want to get one more time to the question of who was hiding the fact that bin Laden was actually in Iran? And
our intelligence agencies, they have plausible deniability. In the end, I have 10 silver bullets, including 2 royal family members from 2 different royal families, from 2 different countries, including, in the end, the person that was in the room, who was a knock for our government for 50 years. He's not from the U.S. He's become a friend of mine. He's been to my home. We've met dozens of times. And on one of my trips to the Middle East, he said to me, you know, he calls me, my dear, you were right. I said, about what? He said, about a lot of things. But you're right about bin Laden. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, he was placed in Iran and Baluchistan. He said, I said, you know? He said, yes, I know that. He said, I was in the room when the deal was cut. So the U.S. has plausible deniability that they weren't in the room.
Was the point to get to Iraq?
The point was to the point was to manipulate to get our troops committed to go over to fight the battles in Afghanistan, Iraq, and that whole region of the world.
Yes.
And they had to have the justification to do that.
I believe it.
But in the end, when 5 years ago, and even Trump doesn't know this, I'm sure, we killed someone that Trump took great credit for, and I applaud him for it. And he said, we killed this guy.
Soleimani?
That's right. Soleimani was the guy the deal was cut with. The deal was not cut with the Iranian government. And we need to understand that. And this is the heart of what we have to get to. The Iranian people are not our enemy. I wrote this book in 2005, Countdown to Terror. It's all about Iran. It says that the people of Iran are not our enemy. And this book was endorsed by Jim Woolsey with a 3-page letter.
Former CIA director.
Former CIA director. This book was endorsed by Jack Caravelli, Gore's CIA advisor. They both endorsed my book. The book was so popular that the people of Iran published it in Farsi. There it is. And they published the book. Without my approval, they published my book. It became a bestseller in Iran because it said, you're not the enemy of the American people. Here's what happened, Tucker. When the Shah was in power, think back, we were best friends with Iran.
Of course.
Our intelligence people trained the Iranian intelligence people. We trained them. They were our people. When the radical Ayatollahs and the mullahs took over Iran, they did not bring in a new intelligence service. They did not change the agency. The IRG stayed the same. The deal to place bin Laden in Iran wasn't cut with the Iranian government. It was cut with Soleimani. And that's why we killed him. Our intelligence agency has tentacles around the world. And they're not answering to anybody. And that's the problem right now. That's the problem Trump has. Yeah, he can cut off the security clearance of 51, but that network extends far and wide around the world, and they can play all the games they want in Ukraine, in other countries. And until we go after that, this is not going to stop.
That's all consistent with what I've seen.
And,
I would say.
And that's
I don't think that's not a crazy statement.
That's the challenge that Trump has right now. I still think he's at risk. Last May I went on a TV show locally in the Philadelphia area, and I said my greatest challenge is they're going to try to take Trump out. A month later, they did the attack. You know, it goes back to when I kept quiet because I couldn't trust any of the administrations after I left, including the Bush administration, because Bush wasn't in control. And I can give you example after example.
I saw
Bush not being in control. Yeah. I knew who was in control. When Trump was going in, I met with Rudy Giuliani. I had 2 private dinners with him up in New York. I had not known Rudy that well. I said, Rudy, this is what's going to happen. The deep state's going to undermine Trump. They don't want him. They will undermine him by removing his ability to understand how they operate. Before he took office, they took out General Mike Flynn.
Yep.
When they took out Flynn, Trump was like a baby in the woods. And for 4 years, they used the Congress and they used their connections to derail this country. That's the problem that occurred in the first Trump 4 years. This time, I'm trying to get Trump to realize he's got a great start. But the people around him don't know what they don't know. They don't have that historical understanding of what this just didn't happen with Trump. I mean, they took me out in 2006.
So let's get to that. They took you out in 2006, and that's kind of where this conversation began. I remember that very well. And it was like there were pictures on TV. I worked then at CNN. There were pictures of, FBI and their blue jackets outside your daughter's house. And it's like, Curt Weldon, corruption scandal. And then you lost to Sestak? Sestak, who was like a former general and just like
He got demoted. He was a 3-star, demoted to a 2-star. His wife worked on the Clinton Security Council. She had intelligence ties. She still does. Her name was, I think, Clark. And so he was on the NSC.
But he was like the ultimate deep stater.
He didn't live in the district. He doesn't live there now.
Right.
He came into the district to run. He had been in the district. And then after he lost, he went back down to Virginia.
And all of a sudden, I mean, I remember all this really well, thinking like,
well, here's what happened.
And then he got, massive funding from around the country.
You know who ran his campaign? His campaign was managed by the staff director of Sandy Berger's company. Sandy Berger sent his woman to run the Sestak campaign. And I did a 1-hour floor speech about Sandy Berger, calling him a traitor.
Yeah.
And we can talk about the
I'd like to, and I'm just getting far afield once again, and my apologies for that. But okay, so to your daughter and the FBI raid, did you have warning? Like what?
No advance
tell us what happened.
No advance warning. We would have won the election. The polls were in October were showing that we were up by about 6 or 8 points. All my elections have been landslides because I'm a moderate Republican, and this one I would have become chairman of the committee. No doubts about that. for some reason, the Sestak campaign was maxed out every week in a TV buy, and 3 weeks before my election, I get a call on a Monday morning that agents had appeared at my daughter's home at 7 a.m. And I didn't know what's that all about. And so I immediately said, cancel the TV ads. My daughter's more important than some TV ads for a campaign. And I didn't know whether she might have done something wrong. I didn't think she would have. And so we stopped the campaign. But something that I haven't talked about in the past, Tucker, the same time they raided my daughter's house, they raided a lawyer in my district who's a Democrat who, interestingly enough, they shut down his Philadelphia office. They brought dogs and helicopters and all to downtown Philly, same time. At the time they raided his office, he had been working for FBI counterintelligence against Russia for 2 years that I had arranged 2 years earlier. I had arranged 2 years earlier, under oath. So the counterintel people handling him went to his office and were sitting with him while these agents from D.C. come in, and you had 2 sets of agents in the same office at the same time. And the counterintel people are saying, don't answer any questions. We don't know what this is, but you're doing work for our country. And the other ones don't know why they're sent there. Their first question is, Mr. Gallagher, isn't it true that you're related to Congressman Curt Weldon? And John starts laughing at them because Congressman Weldon's wife's last name is the same name as mine, and you're from the FBI? I know who told them that, Tucker.
Wait, so what was the pretext for raiding your daughter's house?
There was none. They never talked to her.
So what was she charged with? What did she go
They never charged her with anything. They never talked to her. There was no charge.
So the FBI just shows up,
raids, takes boxes out, and then gives her the boxes back unopened, still taped. Nothing. Nothing.
When did they give the boxes back?
That was months later.
After you'd lost.
Yeah, and not only that, 3 months after the election, the annual fire dinner in Washington, which I started, 2,000 people attend, members of Congress, House and Senate. George Bush, the father, former CIA director, does a tribute to me, which I sent it to your staffer. You can play it. And he says in the tribute, Congressman Weldon, you're the kind of leader that America needs. You're the kind of leader that leaves the country safer, stronger. Those aren't my words. Those are George Bush Sr.'s words to 2,000 people after they raided my daughter's house.
After you'd already been neutralized.
After I'd been
you were not going to be.
It was all about getting me out.
So did you? So the raid comes. You must be completely confused. Did you call your daughter and say, like, what's going on?
She was totally devastated. Ruined her life. How do you deal with that?
I don't know.
How do you deal with your kid?
I'm probably going to find out at some point.
If you want to come after me. And that's what I say to them. They're scumbags.
Oh, I know.
You scumbag, if you want to come after me publicly. But if you're going to hide and go do something behind somebody, which you do, now there are good people in the agency, but there are scumbags that work in our agencies. And I know them. And they're making money. They're $1 million people. And their $1 million companies are going to be exposed if it's the last thing I do. And you'll see the ties around the world to the $1 million intel people who've made money off the backs of young American kids who have died in wars while they make money, or their companies make money. And I'll give you example after example of that in Russia, in Ukraine, around the world, in Libya. That's what's wrong. And until we understand that, it's not going to stop. And Donald Trump's people need to understand that. We're not playing tiddlywinks out in the schoolyard. We're playing with bad people.
I agree. Yeah, as I've said, I've seen it up close, so I know that you're telling the truth.
What they do to my family is outrageous.
So this happens, and in the final month of a campaign, with
3 weeks,
with this challenger who doesn't live in your district, who all of a sudden has, I think I'm remembering this correctly, a lot of his money came from California.
All of it. And then we find out, Tucker, and I'll give it to you. We get a memo. My staff does some digging. What's going on? And we find a memo that was sent to my staff in September, a month before this, from the National Republican Congressional Committee to my campaign committee saying, hey, for some reason, your opponent just cut his TV buy for 1 week in October by $500,000. The week was the week they raided my daughter's house.
Because you wouldn't need it.
So they told the Democrats the week they were going to raid my daughter's house.
I believe it.
Because they didn't need the advertising that week.
But what's crazy, if you think about it, and by the way, I should say of Sestak, who I always thought was just such a reptile, but he had kind of like the perfect views. He was very liberal socially, but on foreign policy questions, he was just national security state.
He's a loser.
Perfect national security state.
He's an embarrassment, and I'll say it publicly. He's an embarrassment.
Oh, I could.
And what he did to my family, I'll never forget.
So, but that's the Bush Justice Department.
Absolutely.
That's the Bush FBI.
It's the and I wrote a letter to Mueller, which I'll give you a copy.
Mueller was FBI director then?
Yes, I wrote a personal memo to him on LinkedIn, right to his personal self. And I said, Mr. Mueller, I respect you personally for being a Marine, but you're a scumbag for what you did to my family.
So did you call over to the White House and say, like, what the hell is going on?
I called Karl Rove. He said, get a good lawyer. And I have no respect for Karl Rove.
Well, no one does.
And I'll tell you that story on another show.
Wait, so but your daughter's house gets raided. She doesn't get charged with anything. The FBI never even
isn't talked to. Not charged. Doesn't even get talked to. No one.
And CNN, where I'll admit it, I then worked.
You know the only person that defended me?
Who?
You're going to laugh.
No, probably not.
Joe Scarborough.
I believe that.
He was on my committee. Joe Scarborough, I'll give you the article, defended me and said, Congressman Weldon will never do anything like this. And the stupid jerk reporter said, oh, Scarborough doesn't know what he's talking about. Joe Scarborough was the only one at that time who really publicly, aggressively defended me.
I believe that. And I knew Joe very well then. And
he was on my committee on
he's not a stupid person, by the way. Whatever Joe's many faults, he's not dumb. And he gets how politics work.
But he won't talk to me now.
Of course not. Okay, so you call Karl Rove and you say, like, what the hell, Karl Rove? What is going on here? And he just says...
To get a good lawyer.
That was it?
Yeah. He's the same scumbag that when I told him that I told this company in Florida that was being harassed to hire a lobbyist, I told him to hire Bob Dole, and he started screaming at me on the phone. He said, who are you to tell anybody to hire Bob Dole's law firm? I said, Bob Dole's a war hero. He's a credible person. He said, don't you know who his partner is? I said, I have no idea who his partner is. Well, his partner was Ian Richards from Texas. What does that have to do with somebody doing national security issues? Because Karl Rove was from Texas and his nemesis in Texas was Bob Dole's partner, he didn't want them to benefit?
That's what he's like.
That's exactly what he's like.
He's a small, fat man. There's no doubt about that. Very small. So we're not positive if cryptocurrency is the future of finance, but we do know that what we have now is broken and dangerous. Debt has never been higher in this country. Many of our so-called leaders are getting rich, serving you. It's a scam. So where does it go? Well, thankfully, there are options. Donald Trump has said repeatedly he wants the United States to be the crypto capital of the world. He's already created the Crypto Advisory Council and recently signed an executive order to establish a Bitcoin strategic reserve. This could give normal people an alternative to the government's failing system and, frankly, to the U.S. dollar. I'm not saying put all your money outside the U.S. dollar, but, like, don't be crazy. Don't be stupid here. You can see where it's going. So the people at I Trust Capital can help you get in to this. It's complicated for people who aren't following it. They make it easy. They're based 100% in the United States of America. We looked into this. They service only American investors, and they operate the only platform that allows you to buy and sell crypto 24/7, both inside and outside of your tax-advantaged IRA. And it all happens on one easy-to-use dashboard. They also operate a closed-loop system, meaning that bad actors can't access your account and steal your money. So if you're considering adding Bitcoin, if you want to, or some other cryptocurrency to your portfolio, iTrust can be trusted, and it's easy to understand. itrustcapital.com or click the link below. Wow. Okay. So that's the end of your political career.
Well, it's the end of my public career, but I have a lot of friends.
I know. I got that. I have
a lot of people that support. Now people want me to talk, and I am talking because Trump's in power. And the only thing they can do is they can kill me. Now, 2 of my friends were killed, or I think they were killed. One was threatened by a guy that was running to be the head of the CIA. He got a call. And this guy that was in Florida, John Quirk, was career intelligence for the CIA, and he helped me. He gave me all the internal stuff of what they were doing to try to portray me as a Russian spy of all this stupidity.
Right. Well, been there.
Right. So Quirk called me and said, you won't believe who I got a call from. He told me the guy's name. He said, the guy said to me, why are you helping Curt Weldon? And John Quirk said, because Curt Weldon's a patriot. The guy slammed down the phone. That guy's a multimillionaire in New York right now. Multimillionaire. Made his money off the backs of the American people.
What happened to your friend? You think he was murdered?
I think he was given they both had fast-moving cancer. And that's a typical process that the agency uses overseas when they want to get rid of somebody.
I'm aware of that. Most people are not aware of that. But do you know that to be true, that is a...
I can't prove it.
No, but do you know that...
I know they both died suddenly.
The U.S. government has the technology to...
Oh, absolutely.
infect people with fast-moving cancer.
Absolutely. Yeah. As they do with the, in 1997, I did the first hearing on asymmetric threats. I was the chairman of the research committee, and I focused on 4 threats. And you can read about them. The first threat was the use of drones, which nobody was using then. The second was cyber attacks, which is now a big deal. The third was EMP. People don't even know what EMP is. I was the leader of that. I wrote the EMP legislation. And the fourth was cognitive warfare. People don't understand cognitive warfare. And today our intelligence agencies trying to pretend they don't know what it is. Like, oh, we don't know what that is. Because the Russians have used it, and the Chinese, they call it Havana Syndrome.
Right.
We know what it is.
The directed energy weapons.
Directed energy weapons.
But you believe that, and the only reason I'm pushing on this is because I know for a fact that highly informed people in other countries with, real intel services who are not crazy or sophisticated, take it as a matter of fact that it is possible to transmit fatal cancer from one person to another or from a machine to a person. And you know that that's true?
I don't know that. The details, I know the research that was being done when I was chairman of the Oversight Committee for Research was very provocative, and we need members of Congress that are unafraid to get fully immersed in understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it. The problem with the members of Congress is that they're good members in both parties, but they get staffers who have career goals, and their career goal might be to go work at the Pentagon or go work for the agency.
Yes.
So they get compromised midway through. You can't have that. You got to have people to understand their loyalty has got to be for the country and for what their original goal. And that's why it's so important that we, and the ultimate goal here is to have this Presidential Commission on 9/11 to hold people accountable and to let the president appoint a commission that asks the questions of what really happened, both intelligence-wise and with the actual structure, so that we understand, and then we make those people accountable. Believe me, when we do that, then you shake the system up.
I agree with that, and I think it's really important to begin declassifying a lot of things that the U.S. government has done with our money in our name over the past 60 years. Starting with the Kennedy assassination, which the president, has issued an executive order on January 23rd to declassify. It hasn't happened. MLK, RFK, et cetera, et cetera. I think we should know what happened in Butler Township in July, but I think the big story is 9/11, and the
reason is all those happened decades ago, and I agree with you. 9/11 is only 24 years ago, and I have all the information. I have the firefighters ready to go. I have the tapes of the firefighters and what they saw and heard. I have all the architects and engineers and all their 3,000 of them risking their careers. I have the lawyers. I have the families. Everybody's ready to go. All Trump has to do is name a new presidential commission. Let them do the investigation. We'll give them all the material, and then we'll show the country that we will not allow these people to commit these kinds of they're not even unscrupulous. They're outrageous and scandalous and traitorous acts against our nation. Imagine planning to kill American people. I can't begin to think of that.
Okay, so, but you've also just said that 2 friends of yours died of fast-moving cancer.
I don't know that.
They died of cancer.
Died of cancer,
like. Right. But you think that the people who are hiding the truth about 9/11 are capable of murder?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I guess that would be obvious since 3,000 people were murdered that day.
Just like Libya. We were the ones that caused Gaddafi's death because Hillary Clinton played a game over there. And I was the one that went over there during the war. Gaddafi asked me to come over. I took a Biden staffer and a Bush staffer and a film crew leader from ABC One in New York, Larry Menti, with me, and a cameraman, because I didn't want the CIA to set me up. I hand-carried the letter back from Gaddafi offering to resign. The U.S. didn't want him to resign. They wanted to kill him.
Why?
Because Gaddafi, and I met him 3 times. I took Biden on my second trip to Libya, by the way. He went with me when I spoke to the whole country. At every meeting I had with Gaddafi, he wanted 2 things. He wanted to unite the African continent into a group of nations economically, like the European economy. He wanted to base it on the gold standard. And the U.S. and Europe didn't want that. And the other thing is they wanted control of his oil, and they wanted control of his sovereign wealth. So Gaddafi had to go. That's outrageous, and it's wrong.
Yeah, but that, I think, sounds right to me.
I mean, but we've allowed so many of our kids to be drawn into conflicts, to be killed. And these people doing this they've never served in any capacity in our country. They've never been in the military. They've never served on a fire ground. And it's outrageous that they think they can get away with this and sit back and make all this money. It's outrageous.
I couldn't agree more. So, let's get to 9/11 itself. And you were so deeply involved in so many parts of this personally that I think it's easy to go off on different tangents, but just to the extent that you can describe what you know to be true, You said don't want to speculate as to motive, for example, but what you know to be true. What do you think the core truth of 9/11, September 11th, 2001 is? What?
I don't, at this point in time, I have my own perceptions. I don't have something I can give 100%. I can't swear on, but what I'm seeing bothers me to the core of my body, that 9/11 did not happen because a group of hijackers got control of some planes. First of all, I have confirmed that 2 of the hijackers that were on one of the planes in New York were working for the CIA. They were on the CIA payroll. And that was confirmed to me by someone in writing from one of our agencies, and I have that letter. So 2 of the people involved were actually working for the CIA in one of the planes. I know that. And they lost control of them. And there were reprimands against those agency people after the fact. Second, I know the intelligence, they tried 3 times to transfer the information about information that could have prevented 9/11. That's fact.
To the Justice Department.
And I have the name of the person that at the Justice Department they contacted, and she was told to cancel the meetings. They couldn't have the meetings.
Who did that order come from? Who?
That's what needs to be investigated.
Okay.
And then we have John Crane, the Inspector General of the Pentagon, who went to the extent of issuing a request for whistleblower status because he was told to lie to the Congress and lie about pre-9/11 intelligence and able danger. And then we have General the book by the General and his comments that he knew within seconds of none of this is in the 9/11 Commission report. The 9/11 Commission report is a piece of garbage.
Well, then you also have it. I mean, this is just a fact. I don't know what to make of it, but you have a guy called Alex Jones, who's a broadcaster, who said that summer that the World Trade Centers are going to hit by planes and a guy called Osama bin Laden is going to be blamed. He said that on tape with a timestamp, so we know that actually happened. That's not making it up. It's not a conspiracy theory. He said that. And it's like, how would he know that? That's so far out of the realm of what anyone was thinking in Washington, where I lived at the time. So then my question is, okay, if I'm Philip Zelikow, the guy running the 9/11 Commission, I'm calling Alex Jones immediately, saying, come on in, under oath, and we're going to find out, how did you know that? And instead, the U.S. government, the FBI in particular, set about to destroy Alex Jones and almost succeeded. I mean, they engineered $1 billion judgment against him, et cetera, but they really have tried to kill him for saying that. And it's like, if you wanted to get to the truth, why would you act that way? Okay. Why would you knock you out of Congress? At
the time of 9/11, I had been to the World Trade Center in 93. The governor of New York, Mario Cuomo, called my office, talked to me personally, thanked me for coming up. He watched my 1-hour presentation. I was back up there with Ray Downey. I brought Ray Downey's widow and 5 kids down to my district after 9/11 to honor him as a hero. I was up all during the 9/11 incident at Ground Zero, and I did everything I could and I felt responsible. Do you know the 9/11 Commission would not let me testify before the commission? Now, I'm a firefighter. I'm a fire chief. I'm a state fire instructor. I spent my whole career helping protect people from disasters. The 9/11 Commission, even though my experience as a member of Congress, Vice Chairman of Defense and Homeland Security, would not call me to testify, would not call me to go in and speak before the 9/11, because they knew what I would say. So when the commission said it's going to issue its report, which was
pardon to interrupt, what year was that?
It was when the report was released. I think it was 2005. So what I did, the report was being released in the Ways and Means room of the Cannon Building. I went over. I sat in the front row to be the first one. Lee Hamilton and Tom Keene were up there. Good people. I don't blame them. Yeah. It wasn't them. It was the staffers that controlled this. It wasn't the commissioners.
This is Zelikow guy.
That's right. Zelikow and Gorelick. And Dieter Snell. Dieter Snell was a staffer working for them.
Jamie Gorelick, who was a Clinton DOJ.
Appointee who wrote the firewall memo that said you can't transfer military intelligence to civilian law enforcement.
I think Bill Kristol's cousin, too, unless I'm misremembering that.
Maybe that's the case. So I sat in the front row and I said, Lee, why did you not allow me to testify? And he said to me, well, Congressman, we had a lot of people that wanted to testify. Now, I'm the representative of all the firefighters in the country. I'm the point person for the firefighters. Yes. I'm a firefighter and a fire chief. I'd been at the Trade Center in 93. I'd been there in 9/11, and they would not let me testify because they didn't want to hear what I had to say.
What would you have said?
I would have said that we caused this.
What do you mean?
With the intelligence, I have the evidence that we could have stopped this. Not me. Louis Freeh said that. Based upon what I came out with, Louis Freeh's op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, which I can give you a copy of, said the 9/11 Commission was an incomplete investigation. And he also went on Good Morning America and said the same thing. They tried to blame Louis Freeh because Louis Freeh had left the FBI the year before 9/11 happened. So he was their scapegoat. And to this day, I think Louis is very upset over that.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that.
So the only way around this is to have for the firefighters of America and for our country, to have an independent commission be appointed and give that commission full authority to take this wherever it goes, including the end result. And the end result may be very ugly.
There's a sense in which that's pretty obvious. I mean, like, why is anything from 9/11 still classified? It's our country. It happened to 3,000 of our fellow Americans. We have an absolute right to know what happened. It's not even a question. And it was almost 25 years ago. So, like, spare me your lectures about national security. But can I ask you this? So, by the way, I never questioned anything about 9/11, and I actively attacked people who did. I'm ashamed of that, but that's a fact. I did it on tape more than once. Because my feeling was, well, like, that's divisive or whatever. I was a child and an idiot. But what began to make me wonder, and I have no idea what happened in 9/11, but it's very clear that there's a lot of lying around it, was the collapse of Building 7. And all the wackos would be like, Building 7, Building 7. I'd be like, shut up, wackos. And then if you just sort of look at it, you're like, well, that is very weird, actually. No plane hit that building. And does this happen a lot when buildings catch fire? Right. Okay.
Besides being a firefighter, I work for the INA, largest insurance company in North America. I was responsible for training their fire protection arson people for 18 years. That doesn't happen. You never have a 47-story building just collapse, which this did. Even Donald Trump, I have a tape of him speaking on 9/11, and Donald Trump, which I'll give you a copy
I've seen it. Yeah.
In his own words, says that's controlled demolition.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly looks that way. I mean, look, I don't know.
See, here's what they did. They brought in NIST. They brought in NIST to do a report.
Can you tell us what NIST is?
NIST is the National Institute for Standards and Technology, to do an assessment. Now, they're like any other federal agency, and there are good people there, but there are people that want their jobs and want their careers, and they're not going to rock the boat. And they came out with a report that's hogwash. The University of Alaska, which is a very credible engineering department, did a full refutation of the NIST report, saying it's full with gaps and full with inaccuracies and areas where they did not get the right information. Let me just say this to you. People say, well, you can't question NIST. NIST always does the right thing. When I went to Congress, Tucker, in my first term, I'm 2 doors from the Speaker's office, Speaker Jim Wright. His office catches on fire. It's 7 o'clock at night. As a firefighter, I go up, punch the door open, get down on my hands and knees, crawl in. The kitchen's fully involved. This is all documented. You can read about it. And said to my staffer, go get me the portable extinguishers. 3 of the 5 weren't charged. I said, go get me the hose in the hose station. There was no hose in the hose station. I come back out and I say, we got to evacuate the building. Now, I'm in my first term. It's a 7-story building above ground. No sprinklers, no detectors, no alarms. Here is the building, one of the 6 office buildings holding the House and the Senate, in violation of every building code and fire code in America. Now, I'm an expert on NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code, and the BOCA codes. This building, if NIST did its job, NIST would have said, if you're going to be in Congress, you're going to work in a building where your constituents who are blind and handicapped are not going to feel threatened. 7 stories above ground. No alarm system. No detection system. So a fire's occurring, and the police are running through the building yelling, fire, get out. That's you cannot trust the federal agencies.
Obviously. Of course. That's obvious now. But tell us, like, from an engineering perspective, like, what you had 3 buildings come down, sort of collapse in on themselves, implode, it looked like. And like a lot of people have said, many credible, non-crazy people have said that was controlled demolition. Was it?
Well, when I got up there the day after, I had been in the Trade Center at the restaurant on the top several times. There's no way those 2 buildings could have collapsed into what they were there. Something had to happen.
Was that obvious to you immediately?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, and they were looking for other firefighters like Ray Downey and the 342 others that were trapped and eventually vaporized. So something happened. Whether there's a high explosive material, I think it's called fermite, that is used to explode metal and steel and vaporize it. Those tests were never done on that. There were some limited tests that found that there was some evidence of that, but the whole thing never was subjected to the kind of investigation that would be warranted when 3,000 people die. I mean, when you have 3,000 people die, you would think it would be a full, massive investigation, not going after 9/11, obviously, but what happened to the buildings and why'd they come down? They're the only high-rise buildings in the world that have ever come down from an airplane hitting them. And those buildings, I read the report from the architect who designed them. They were designed to withstand an airplane hitting the building and standing tall.
And especially Building 7, which had no plane hit it. Right.
No plane hit it. And the building just, you can see it when you watch it on TV, it just implodes straight down. And what really got me again was Oriole Palmer, the battalion chief, arising on the...
Well, tell us who he was. What is...
Okay, Oriole Palmer was one of the most inspirational battalion chiefs in New York.
FDNY.
FDNY, who immediately, in very good shape, had a family, a couple of kids, went into the building as soon as they got on the scene, took the elevator up to the 40th floor, got off the elevator, and you can hear him on the comm system say, "I'm here, 40th floor, we're going to start walking up the stairwells." Every 5 floors, he radios back to communication. "I'm on the 50th floor. Everything's okay. We're on floor 60. Everything's okay." He's going up. Every so many floors, he gives a report. He reaches the 78th floor, the floor of impact. He comes out of the stair tower, and as clear as you listening to me here, and I know I get passionate, and I apologize to your listeners for that, he says, "We're on floor 78, the floor of impact. We've got 2 fires, and we can handle them." 1 minute later, the whole building collapses. That's not normal. That is not acceptable. That is not what happened.
And this is on tape?
It's on tape. The film is called Bravo 7. And if your viewers want it, if they contact you, I'll give it to you. It's free. It was produced not by Hollywood. It was produced by firefighters. And it includes the footage, including the firefighter, the footage of the firefighter communication between him and the command center. You can hear him as plain as day saying, "I'm on the impact floor, floor 78. We have 2 fires here. We can control them." And he's comfortable. He's not worrying about the building collapsing. He just walked up 38 floors and the whole building collapses. Tucker, it's a big lie.
Can I, what? Okay, 2 things. What percentage of firefighters who were there that day are knowledgeable about building fires agree with you on this?
Well, I have the utmost respect for the fire department of New York. When I wrote the manuscript Able Danger, which I didn't publish because my lawyer said they would kill me back in 2006, I never published it. I'm going to publish it this year. Last summer in July, I took a draft copy of the manuscript, and I met for 2 hours with John Esposito. He's the chief. He's a great man. I have total respect for him. And John knows me. And I said, "John, you know my respect for the department." And I said, "Yes, Congressman, we know that." I said, "I want to give you this copy of my manuscript, and I'm signing it in honor of Ray Downey for you to keep in your archives. This is what really happened." He took it. I felt I owed it to the fire department of New York and their members. There has been this subtle pressure to the firefighters and to the officers not to talk for obvious reasons. You know what this involves politically. And look what happened to the chief of L.A. The female chief of L.A. comes out and says that the resources were taken away from her for the field forest fires. And what does the mayor do? She fires her. That was just a few weeks ago. The firefighters are always a scapegoat. That's why, Tucker, I'm done with this. If it's the last thing I do, firefighters are not going to be taken for granted anymore. We're going to rise up. We're going to shake the country to its roots. So, firefighters are not second-class citizens.
Well, they certainly shouldn't be.
But if they talk, they'll get sidelined. They'll be called crazies, even though they heard explosions. They can't be allowed to say that.
They heard explosions?
Yeah, absolutely. It's on tape. We have people coming out of the buildings that heard explosions. We have film footage of people that talked to Fox News that was taken off the air, and then now that was brought back by X. That's all available. That's why you need a commission to go back and look at all the lies.
Wait, so there are, and pardon my ignorance, but there are people on tape saying I heard explosions.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. Multiple people.
So the counter to this, which is also kind of rooted in common sense, is, wow, that would require a lot of people to be involved in a vast conspiracy and to stay silent for 24 years. And that's just impossible because people talk.
Not a lot of people. Not a lot of people. It would involve a very, very precise action of planning and taking steps to control the situation. I have no firsthand evidence of this, That's why this is the most important thing. If there's one thing that you have the ability to do, because you're very well respected and deservedly so, you coming out and showing that report, that request, put out by the firefighters of America and by the people who are, excuse me for doing that.
No problem.
The people who are the most impacted by this.
Yes.
I've helped them now. I'm not, there's no money in this for me. Everything I'm doing is pro bono.
Yeah.
Pro bono. A new presidential commission. There was no presidential commission before. This would be the first presidential commission.
We recommend you take this moment to do what we're about to do, which is enjoy an Alp. Wait, can I ask though, like,
9/11.
if we find out, I mean, one of the reasons I became so upset was actually an Alex Jones guy years ago. At some campaign event I was covering, 9/11 Building 7. And I was like, shut up, asshole. No one wants to hear that. And I was being a child and ignorant, as I have admitted many times. And I was wrong, because you should always be for the truth, no matter what. On the other hand, I think my instinct was informed by the feeling that, wow, if we find out that U.S. government officials or foreign officials or anybody is hiding the truth about an event that murdered 3,000 totally innocent people, like, that's, how could your country continue if you found out?
It would be almost as bad as if there were people in our country who planned to allow bin Laden to stay in Iran while we sent kids to Afghanistan and 2,500 came back in body bags. It would be almost as bad.
No, you're right. No, you're right.
Tucker, the American people don't understand. I was in decisions as vice chairman of the committee where I heard conversations talk about acceptable casualties. There are no acceptable casualties. If I have a son or a daughter, and I'm the youngest of 9, my brothers and sisters served in every branch of the military. None of them would be acceptable casualties. And if we had people that made the decision that we can afford to get people over in Afghanistan knowing that several thousand are going to come back dead, we've got to find an alternative to that. And if we didn't do it there, then we shouldn't do it in the U.S. Do I think 9/11 is going to be the biggest scandal in our lifetime and beyond? Yes, I think it's going to be the biggest scandal in the history of America because it occurred on U.S. soil and because it is so recent that we have relevant information still available.
That's right.
We have recorded information. We have personal information. Once people realize they can talk and not be afraid of being killed or not being afraid of being ostracized. And you know what gets me is reporters who call people conspiracy theorists. Well, that's all the agency does.
I know.
They're the ones that create the conspiracies.
I'm aware.
I mean, cut me a break.
I'm aware.
They have whole courses for their agents on how to make people look like they're conspiracy theorists.
And the propaganda operations designed to discredit.
Exactly.
Right. And
so all we want is the truth.
Of course.
So Trump, appoint people of impeccable integrity. Let them study the facts. I will testify under oath everything I know about intelligence. Let these 3,000 architects who are risking their careers, making nothing, let them testify under oath.
So let me ask you a very dark question. I don't even know if I want the answer, but Flight 93, which crashed in your state in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, became a kind of, and you feel obviously so crushed for the people, Todd Beamer and the rest on that flight, and they sound like they acted bravely and all that. But, Dick Cheney, President Bush was hiding at Offutt Air Force Base, refused to come back to D.C. because of cowardice. And so Cheney was kind of running everything on that day, on September 11th. And he said, it's been reported, he gave the orders to shoot down that plane. But then they told us, no, it wasn't shot down. The hijackers were under assault by the passengers, and so they drove it into the ground. Do you think that plane was shot down by the U.S. government?
I don't have any evidence of that, but I've seen other speculation that plane may have been heading for the Chicago Tower. And if it wasn't for the people on the plane that diverted it and turned it around, that's where it was heading.
For sure. Well, clearly it was that plane was going to be used to kill Americans, no doubt.
And I lost a constituent that was a pilot on one of the planes, Michael Horrocks, who went to Westchester, the same school I went to. And I immediately contacted his widow and raised the funds to build a playground in his honor at the elementary school for his kids. So I felt it personally. This story is a story that America has to come to grips with this, because if there's any one story that's going to determine whether or not we are a country of what we all claim to be, then as painful as it is, we have to learn the lessons from that. If we don't, and we allow these people that were involved in these cover-ups, and in my case, the people I'm talking about are covering up without any hesitation the intelligence side of it. If we don't do that, then this is just inviting this to happen again and again.
Right.
And it's going to continue. You can't have that in a country like ours. We're supposed to be the symbol around the world. And we get laughed at by people. The people in Libya know what we did and why we did Gaddafi. North Korea, we had a solution for North Korea that Colin Powell endorsed, that I worked on with a bipartisan delegation that the White House under Bush didn't want. And look at now, North Korea is threatening an attack. All of these things we create. And if the American people don't have access to know the truth, then we're not really what we say we are.
Who are the darkest actors in the Bush administration, do you think?
I can't name any one. I mean, Sandy Berger, in my opinion, should have been tried for treason.
So Sandy Berger was, I agree, well, he committed treason, so he should have been. He's passed now. I knew him. He was National Security Advisor for Bill Clinton. So tell us, you've made reference to him, for those who don't remember or are getting their history from Wikipedia. Who is Sandy Berger and why do you think he committed treason?
And Wikipedia, by the way, has no credibility.
I'm very aware of that.
They are basically, it's a controlled
I'm aware.
process
Yes.
to manipulate.
And you don't really know that until
I know it.
Just because, you get older and like there are some things on Wikipedia. It's like, wait, I was there. I know that's not
Two
true.
things about Sandy Berger. Sandy Berger was when this all started. He was security advisor for Clinton in the 90s. And as a member of the Cox Commission, which was a formal commission established by the Congress, made up of 9 members.
Headed by Congressman Chris Cox of California.
That's right. 5 Republicans, 4 Democrats, all committee chairs except me. I was appointed by Newt. And we spent 6 months behind closed doors looking at all the data about why China stole our technology. And what we ended up with was a 9-0 vote. Our security was severely harmed by China's acquisition of technology. And Chris Cox wanted a 9-0 vote. I went beyond that, and working with the people that I had befriended that were doing the Able Danger stuff, I said, why did this happen? And they produced charts for me, which I have given to you, to show the process that China established. And China did what we do. We try to spy on other countries. That's part of the game.
Yeah,
and it's legitimate.
Yes.
But if you get caught by that, that's your fault. China set up a process using money through their Central Military Commission, the People's Liberation Army, to set up front companies to deliberately acquire selected technology in the U.S. by using campaign donations, primarily to the Clinton campaign in the mid-'90s. The charts show that. You have those charts. Those donations resulted in waivers of arms control agreements. Those donations involved in waivers of controls over technology, and all the technologies are listed. Those charts show that 4 Chinese nationals who had no citizenship rights here gained access to the White House, in some cases 49 times in 1 year. They were raising money for the Democratic National Party and Clinton. All of that was orchestrated by Sandy Berger politically. In the end, what happened was we basically empowered China to acquire our technology by allowing them to use campaign donations. And the best example I can give you of this is there was a very specific inquiry done by the Justice Department of the Loral Corporation in California. Loral Corporation, very capable space company and technology company, had been caught transferring stage separation technology to China. Stage separation technology allows you to have a multi-stage missile to go long distances.
Yes, which is required for intercontinental.
And China didn't have that. They didn't have that capability. So they got it. So Loral Corporation was caught transferring that. That's a violation. So the Justice Department, this is public information, was about ready to indict the CEO, Bernie Schwartz. Bernie Schwartz went to Sandy Berger and received, this is public information, a retroactive presidential waiver. Retroactive presidential waiver. The technology had already been transferred. Now they get the waiver that it's okay. And that year, Bernie Schwartz becomes one of the single biggest donors in the history of the Democrat Party. I put all the donations in the congressional record. So anyone can go back in the congressional record to that time period and look for my speech, and you'll see the donations of Sandy Berger to the Democrat National Party and Al Gore and Bill Clinton while we were giving our technology. So China didn't steal it. They outsmarted us. That's our fault, not their fault.
Right. They bribed our officials to get the technology.
So that's the first thing with Sandy Berger. Then Sandy Berger was involved in the run-up to 9/11, and he was still Clinton's security advisor. He was told he had to appear before the 9/11 Commission. So 2 weeks before he was to appear, he gets permission to go to the National Archives in Washington. And he goes up to the top floor in a special room. It's a big empty room, and he didn't realize he was on camera. They bring out documents that he has to see before his testimony. He said it was to refresh his memory. He ends up stealing those documents. In a case that many remember and laugh about, he stuffs the documents in his underwear and his socks and his shirt pocket. You've seen the story, and it's all true. He leaves the archives with those national security archives, all pre-9/11 intelligence. And by the way, none of this is in the 9/11 Commission report. None of it.
That's not mentioned.
No. He leaves the archives.
Do we know what those documents were?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. He gets caught. The Inspector General for the archives contacts Berger and said, Mr. Berger, did you take anything while you're in the archives? And he says, no, that's a felony. He lied to a federal agent. He then hires one of Clinton's personal lawyers. That lawyer cuts a plea bargain. Sandy Berger pleads guilty to 11 felonies. Lying to a federal agent, stealing 5 documents, and destroying 5 documents. The plea bargain he gets is 1 misdemeanor. No jail time. He loses security clearance for 1 year. In the August before my election loss, I told my staff I want to go to the archives to see copies of what we think Berger stole. The CIA called my office and said, tell your boss that's very sensitive information. Like, what do you have to tell me what my job is? I know what my job is. I don't need to be reminded by somebody from some agency. So I went there. The documents were all regarding pre-9/11 intelligence. The Millennium After Action report, which was prepared by John Ashcroft, was part of the documents that they didn't want the 9/11 Commission to have. Sandy Berger stole those documents. If you stole documents that are in the National Archives, you'd be in jail right now. Sandy Berger got away with it. 1 felony. He leaves the administration of Clinton and he forms a company. Guess what the company's called? Stonebridge. And he hires Madeleine Albright, Stonebridge Albright. And what do? They represent Chinese corporations.
Disgusting people. Both now gone.
Both now gone.
Do we know what was in those 5 documents?
Well, when I went down there, I looked at what we think he stole. It was all pre-9/11 intelligence.
Suggesting that
we
should have
taken
known
action. Yeah, well, we know that Clinton could have taken out bin Laden in the base camps many times. I mean, all of this, and there's much more intrigue that I don't know about. That's why it needs a thorough investigation, not of staffers, not of hacks, but of people of intellect and people who are willing to put the country first. That's why Trump needs to convene a commission.
This is all so heavy that, you wonder who would take that job.
Now, I have people who will take it. I have firefighters that will take it, fire engineers. I have people that will surprise you that will take the job.
That would take true courage. No one even mentions declassifying 9/11. I mean, it's like, the Kennedy assassination, UAPs. I mean, I'm all for disclosure because we own the government. We're shareholders. We're not slaves. So that's my view. I always push for disclosure, and I really mean it. But on 9/11, I don't even know anyone who wants. I do, but I don't know anybody else other than you who really wants full disclosure because it's like you can feel it glowing. You just feel like, I don't know what that is, but that's really scary.
You know why? Everybody in Washington gets caught up with their careers, with their consultant fees, with their, I'm done with that. I'm still paying the mortgage on my house.
Actually?
Yeah, absolutely paying the mortgage on my house.
At what age?
77.
Amazing.
Yeah, my wife's a nurse. We don't.
So you didn't get rich in Congress?
No, I did not get. And I don't know how Biden and Obama was nothing in the Senate. How do you make $88 million in the Senate when you don't have a job? And Biden, who I grew up with and was a friend with, I mean, our kids went to school together. How does he have multiple houses at the beach? I don't need wealth. I don't need wealth to be successful, and that's not going to be my legacy. But there are people, and it makes me sick to my stomach because I'd like to name them all right now, Tucker.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I have them down. You know my partners, Judge Sullivan, very distinguished, the former deputy director of the FBI, Buck Revelle, Jim Woolsey, former head of the CIA, Chuck Brooks, who you got a note from, former top guy at Homeland Security, Admiral Jay Cohen, who was head of research. They all know what I know, and a lot more people. I had lunch with Jim Jones twice last year, former security advisor to Obama. I don't want to upend their careers. I don't want to cost them money. But America needs to know the truth.
But without naming specific names, I'm familiar with every person that you just mentioned, and I would say from my impression, having lived in D.C. for 40 years, those are good guys, I think, honest people.
Yeah.
But without naming anybody, like people who, and those are all very highly informed people, like actually, for real, not bullshit.
No, they're all real
people.
people.
Yeah, for real. Of those kind of people, how many that you know think, this is not right? The 9/11 report, all of them.
But they're not going to come out.
But everyone kind of knows.
They're not going to be the lead person to come out and take it on. And many people say, Curt, you're crazy. You're.
Well, of course. Well, that's how they try to discredit you.
The
only reason that I've never done a 9/11 show, not a single one, really, that I know, maybe one in 30 years, now 24 years. But the only reason that I wanted to talk to you specifically is because I was there, and so I know how much you know, and you're not a fake person at all. You're like right at the center of it. So I think you have complete credibility on this topic, and I think it's pretty hard to dismiss you as a wacko. If you're a wacko, then why were you going to take over the Armed Services Committee?
Why would Donald Rumsfeld endorse me for the Armed Services Committee?
And if you're still paying your mortgage at 77, you clearly weren't ripping anybody off.
I have no secret bank account.
Clearly. So I do think you've got a lot of credibility, but it's just interesting. You're obviously very focused on this. The people, just to restate, the people that you talk to who are in similar positions of authority, who would have access to real intel on this, they all think that they all think the 9/11 report was just silly cover up.
They think that there's a lot more to what happened than what's being told. The firefighters think the same. But a firefighter who's doing the key thing and why I devote my life to firefighters, they're the most powerful people in the country. They're not driven by power and money. But when I organized them back in 1987, and the fire caucus became the largest in the Congress, I said, these are the people that make America work.
Of course.
I mean, they're the people that not just fight the fires and disasters. They're the people, it's where you vote on election day.
Of course.
It's where you hold the Boy Scout and Girl Scout meeting room. And there are 50,000 stations run by 30,000 departments, and 85% of them are volunteers. Do you know next year, as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of America, the fire service will be 290 years old?
Yeah.
The first fire department was formed by Ben Franklin in Philadelphia in 1736. It didn't take a government to get people to come together to protect each other. It's older than America. And the 50,000 departments are in every town, every village. They're the heart and soul of our nation. They're the backbone of our country.
I know that firsthand.
And that's what I'm telling Trump. If you ignite that group of people, you don't need to have MAGA people alone. You have America then. Because in every poll, firefighters are 98% supported.
They're the only ones everyone likes. I totally agree.
Because they're not driven by power and money.
That's right.
And that's why firefighters don't want to get involved in a political battle. Even if they know they're being shortchanged, even if they know their loved one was killed when they shouldn't have been killed, they keep quiet. Well, I'm not going to keep quiet. I'm their voice, and I'm going to speak out.
So let me ask you one final question for people who've made it this far in the interview. And I want to say for the record, I think you've been really restrained. You haven't speculated on really anything other than things. You said, I saw this, I know this to be true. But you haven't given us some complex theory of why this happened.
I can't. I won't.
Right. But for people who are thinking, wow, this is a little more serious than I realized, and I want to know more, and clearly Wikipedia is a filter, not a way to actually understand history. What responsible, credible accounts of 9/11 would you recommend people read? Like, where do you get closer to the truth?
There is no one single account that I have seen. I would suggest, and they can go on. I'm not on social media except on LinkedIn. And if you go to my LinkedIn, I'll send you a copy of Bravo 7. Bravo 7 is a film 1 hour long done by firefighters, not done by Hollywood. And by the way, my film based on my book's coming out next year, and all the proceeds of my film Firefight are going to firefighters. So nobody can say he's going to make a profit off that. No.
You'll still be paying your mortgage.
My Hollywood film is the proceeds are going to firefighters. And it's about my book. But Bravo 7 gives you the story of what really happened from the eyes of a firefighter. And then it has the audio comments of Oriole Palmer. And if you're a human being and you listen to that brave firefighter with 2 kids, I think 2 or 3 kids, who's risking his life after he went up 40 floors in the elevator, climbing up 38 floors with his team, arriving on the floor of impact and saying, I can handle it. And if we let him die there, like it was just some random thing, then we're not human beings of decency.
I agree.
We owe Oriole Palmer. We owe Ray Downey. Ray Downey told us 93, 8 years earlier, this is going to happen again. Ray Downey told us in the Gilmore Commission we needed to have this fusion center. We allowed unnamed scumbags in the CIA to block us from having a fusion center. We allowed unnamed scumbags in the agencies to block transferring the information that Scott Philpott and Tony Schaefer and Eileen Pricer and Eric Kleinsmith had, that they tried to transfer to the Justice Department. And they also had information before the attack on the USS Cole, when they ruined the career of Kirk Lippold, the commander of the Cole, and I defended him. If we're going to truly be a country that really cares about other people and what we're doing, then we have to live up to that.
That's
and
right.
How can you send your kid to war or combat and all this crap about giving them a home and a place to live and health? Well, great. Let's do it up front. Let's prevent them from needing a home. Let's prevent them from needing health care. Let's prevent them from having to be put in a shelter someplace. Let's focus on the veteran before they become disabled. Let's focus on the firefighter before they die. But see, the media and the intel deep state likes to make it look like, well, we got all these charities out there. These charities allow us to give money like we really care about them. Caring about them after they're dead is not the same as preventing them from dying. And that's what this is about, preventing them from dying. And I'm not going to stop until we take the necessary steps to never let this happen again.
I'm grateful for your determination. And the last thing I'll say is, I think when you give up the love of money, you get filled with a holy power, and you clearly have been. So, Congressman, thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
So it turns out that YouTube is suppressing this show. On one level, that's not surprising. That's what they do. But on another level, it's shocking. With everything that's going on in the world right now, all the change taking place in our economy and our politics, with the war